There's a part of you that you've been running from your entire life. It whispers in your moments of weakness, sabotages your relationships, and makes you react in ways that leave you wondering, why did I do that? Carl Jung called it the shadow, the rejected, denied, and hidden aspects of your personality that you refuse to acknowledge. But here's what most people don't understand. Your shadow doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It grows stronger, and the longer you leave it unintegrated, the more control it has over your life. As Jung himself warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Today, we're going to expose 7 unmistakable signs that your shadow is running the show, and you don't even know it. These aren't abstract theories. These are patterns you'll recognize in your own behavior, your relationships, and the choices you keep making over and over again. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what's been operating beneath the surface, and more importantly, what you can do about it. Intense. You know that feeling when someone does something relatively minor, but you react like they've committed a personal offense against you. Your heart races, your face flushes, and you feel an intensity of emotion that, in hindsight, seems completely disproportionate. This is your first warning sign. When something triggers you beyond what the situation warrants, you're not reacting to what just happened, you're reacting to something buried within yourself. Jung explained that the shadow contains everything we've rejected about ourselves. The qualities we were punished for, the impulses we were taught to suppress, the parts of us that weren't acceptable to our parents, teachers, or society. And when we encounter these same qualities in others, explosion of emotion, that lazy coworker who infuriates you, perhaps you've rejected your own need for rest, that attention-seeking friend who annoys you, maybe you've buried your own desire to be seen. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus wisely noted, it is not things that disturb us, but our judgment about things. Your intense reactions reveal not what's wrong with others, but what you haven't accepted in yourself. But what happens when this rejection goes even deeper? Constant. Do you find yourself constantly criticizing others in your mind, judging their choices, their appearance, their lifestyle? This isn't just a personality trait, it's a diagnostic tool. The things you judge most harshly in others are often the things you cannot accept in yourself. This is what Jung called projection, a defense mechanism where we attribute our own unacceptable qualities to others. Why? Because it's easier to criticize someone else than to admit these qualities exist within us. Think about the person you judge most severely. What exactly bothers you about them? Their selfishness, their neediness, their arrogance. Now ask yourself an uncomfortable question. When in your life have you displayed these exact qualities? Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The harshness of your judgment reveals the depth of your self-rejection. When you criticize someone for being too much or not enough of something, you're often policing boundaries you've set for yourself, boundaries that have never allowed you to express the fullness of who you are. Your judgments reveal your wounds, and this leads us to something even more disturbing about how the shadow operates in your closest relationships. Toxic patterns. You swore you'd never date someone like your ex, yet here you are, in another relationship that feels eerily familiar. Different person, same dynamic. Why does this keep happening? Freud called it repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate unresolved patterns from our past. But from a Jungian perspective, these patterns persist because of unintegrated shadow material. When you haven't integrated certain parts of yourself, you unconsciously attract people who embody those exact qualities. The person who walks all over your boundaries appears because you haven't owned your own assertive, boundary-setting power. The emotionally unavailable partner shows up because you haven't integrated your own fear of intimacy. Same patterns, different faces. It's not bad luck. It's not that all the good ones are taken. It's that your psyche is desperately trying to heal by recreating the wound, hoping that this time you'll respond differently. As Viktor Frankl observed, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. The relationship patterns won't change until you do. until you integrate the parts of yourself you've been projecting onto others. But toxic patterns in relationships are just one manifestation of a deeper issue: self-sabotage. You're on the verge of success, and suddenly you do something that destroys everything you've built. You finally find a healthy relationship, and you push them away. You're about to achieve your goal, and you mysteriously lose motivation. This isn't coincidence. This is your shadow at work. Self-sabotage occurs when there's a conflict between your conscious goals and your unconscious beliefs about what you deserve. Somewhere in your shadow lies the conviction that you're not worthy of success, love, or happiness. Perhaps someone once told you that you weren't good enough. Perhaps early experiences taught you that getting what you want leads to punishment or loss. The only person who is truly holding you back is you. So your psyche, in a twisted attempt to protect you from disappointment, destroys things before they can be taken away. It keeps you small to match your unconscious self-image. Success triggers hidden fear. You might call it bad timing, stress, or just being your own worst enemy. But what it really is shadow material that says, you don't deserve this. And until you bring this belief into consciousness, you'll continue to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Speaking of not seeing yourself clearly, the next sign might be the most invisible of all: chronic shame. There's a difference between guilt and shame, and understanding it is crucial. Guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. If you carry a persistent sense of shame, that nagging feeling that something is fundamentally wrong with you, you're carrying unintegrated shadow material. Shame is what happens when we exile parts of ourselves so completely that their very existence feels like evidence of our defectiveness. Maybe you were shamed for your anger as a child, so now any anger you feel triggers deep self-loathing. Maybe your sexuality was treated as dirty, so now desire fills you with disgust at yourself. Maybe your ambition was labeled as selfishness, so now every success is tainted by shame. Brené Brown's research has shown that shame thrives in secrecy and silence. Shame cannot survive being spoken. It cannot survive empathy. The parts of you that carry shame are the parts most desperately needing integration. Shame hides your power. They are not evidence of your brokenness. They are evidence of what you were forced to reject to survive. The question isn't whether you have these parts. The question is, are you willing to finally welcome them home? But perhaps the most deceptive sign of an unintegrated shadow is this next one: the nice mask. Are you the person everyone describes as so nice? The one who never gets angry, always accommodates others, and puts everyone else's needs first. This might seem like a virtue, but it could be your biggest shadow problem. When niceness is a compulsion rather than a choice, it's not kindness, it's a mask. Jung called this the persona, the face we present to the world. And for many people, especially those raised in environments where anger or assertiveness was punished, the persona becomes a prison. Behind every compulsively nice person is a shadow filled with rage, resentment, and needs that have never been expressed. As Nietzsche understood, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But what happens when your why has become merely pleasing others at the cost of yourself? The nice person who can't say no, who apologizes for existing, who smiles while seething inside. Nice hides rage. That anger doesn't disappear. It leaks out in passive aggression, in resentment, in mysterious physical symptoms, or in explosive outbursts that seem to come from nowhere. True kindness comes from choice, not compulsion. And you can't choose to be kind if you've exiled your capacity for anything else. This brings us to perhaps the most common sign of shadow possession in our modern world: envy's whisper. Envy is one of the most uncomfortable emotions to admit. We'll confess to anger, sadness, even fear before we'll admit to envy. And that's exactly why it's such powerful shadow material. When you feel envy towards someone, your psyche is pointing at something you've denied yourself permission to want or become. The friend whose creative success makes you bitter. Your shadow contains an unlived artist. The colleague whose confidence irritates you. Your shadow holds your own suppressed boldness. Envy is the art of counting the other fellow's blessings instead of your own. But here's the transformation. Envy can become a compass. Instead of hating yourself for feeling it, ask what it's revealing about your own unexpressed potential. Envy points to potential. The person you envy most is often living some version of a life you've forbidden yourself to pursue. They're not your enemy, they're your mirror, showing you what you've pushed into shadow. The question becomes, why have you forbidden yourself this life? What old story, what early wound, what internalized voice told you that this wasn't for you? And this leads us to one more crucial sign that your shadow is controlling your life. Defending flaws. Has anyone ever pointed out something about your behavior and you immediately became defensive? Not curious, not reflective, defensive. The intensity of your defense often correlates with how true the observation is. This is one of the most reliable signs of unintegrated shadow material. When someone touches our shadow, we react as if we're under attack. We explain, justify, deflect, or counterattack. Anything to avoid sitting with the possibility that they might be right. Freud identified numerous defense mechanisms: denial, rationalization, projection, all designed to protect us from threatening truths about ourselves. Defense reveals the wound. The more you cannot tolerate feedback about a particular trait, the more that trait likely lives in your shadow. As the poet Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." This doesn't mean every criticism is valid. But if you find yourself repeatedly defending the same behaviors, getting angry at the same observations, perhaps it's time to ask, what if they are seeing something I can't? What if my defense is the very thing keeping me from growth? But wait, because there's one more sign that often goes completely unnoticed. Victim identity. Do you often feel that life happens to you rather than through your choices? That you're constantly being wronged, misunderstood, or treated unfairly? While genuine victimization exists and should be acknowledged, a persistent victim identity often signals shadow work that needs to be done. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The victim identity, while painful, offers something seductive. It exempts us from responsibility. If everything is someone else's fault, we never have to look at our own contribution. We never have to change. Man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. In the shadow of the chronic victim often lies suppressed power, aggression, and agency. Perhaps you learned early that being vulnerable was the only way to receive care. Perhaps asserting yourself led to punishment. So you became helpless, because helplessness was safe. Victim hides power, but that suppressed power doesn't disappear. It might emerge as passive aggression, as manipulation, as endless complaints that change nothing. Reclaiming your power means acknowledging that you have it, and that having it means taking responsibility for how you use it. And this brings us to the final, most crucial sign of an unintegrated shadow: feared. Here's something Jung understood that few people talk about. The shadow isn't just your darkness, it also contains your light. There's a concept called the golden shadow, and it refers to all the positive qualities you've rejected about yourself. Your brilliance, your power, your beauty, your capacity for greatness. Why would anyone reject good qualities? Because they are terrifying. If you acknowledge your full potential, you become responsible for it. You can no longer hide behind "I'm just ordinary" or "I'm not special." If you see your gifts, you have to use them. And that means risking failure, visibility, and judgment. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. So we dim ourselves. We play small. We sabotage opportunities before they can reveal how capable we truly are. You fear your power. The question becomes, what would happen if you stopped pretending to be less than you are? What relationships might change if you stopped making yourself small so others could feel comfortable? What life might become possible if you own not just your darkness, but your light? We've just walked through 7 unmistakable signs that your shadow is running the show, from intense triggers that reveal your hidden rejections, to the feared potential that keeps you playing small. But understanding these signs is only the beginning. Integration isn't about eliminating your shadow. It's about building a relationship with it. As Jung taught, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Every part of you that you've exiled, your anger, your neediness, your ambition, your power, is waiting to come home. not to control you but to complete you. Wholeness requires your darkness. The goal isn't perfection, it's wholeness. It's being able to say, this too is me. And in that acceptance, something remarkable happens. The shadow loses its power to control you from the unconscious. You become the conscious author of your own life. This is the work of a lifetime, and it begins with a single, courageous act, looking at what you've spent your whole life running from. Welcome to the Psyche Project. If this gave you something to think about, subscribe for more. Understanding yourself is the work of a lifetime. See you in the next video.